The prophecy had been spoken long before humanity ever reached the stars. Passed down by the Skari, the oldest known civilization, it warned of a race born from struggle, shaped by hardship, and destined to one day change the fate of the galaxy. A race that would rise from the fringes of the cosmos and shatter the old order. The Galactic Senate dismissed it as myth, an old tale meant to scare children. The idea that a backwater species, still learning to walk among the stars, could ever pose a threat? Laughable. When humanity was first discovered, the Senate's curiosity lasted only a moment. They saw Earth as an anomaly, a planet that had survived against all odds. But its people? Too young. Too small. A species still warring among themselves, still finding their place. They were not feared. They were tolerated. First contact had been unremarkable. A simple delegation, some diplomatic pleasantries, an invitation into the wider galactic community, at arm's length. They were allowed to trade, to explore, to exist. But never to lead. Never to hold power. Never to be seen as equals. And humanity accepted this. They watched. They learned. They adapted, as they always had. Some among the Senate saw the potential, scientists, scholars, those who studied history. But the great empires scoffed. Humanity was just another species in the grand hierarchy of the stars, and they would remain where they belonged, beneath. Then came the mistake. The Zorvath Dominion, an empire built on conquest, held a military exercise near the edges of human space. It was routine, a show of force meant to remind the lesser races of their place. But something went wrong. A human colony, New Avalon, found itself caught in the path of the war games. The bombardment lasted less than an hour. 10 million lives were erased. When the news reached Earth, the Zorvath did not apologize. They did not offer reparations. They barely acknowledged it at all. To them, this was nothing. Collateral damage. A footnote in the grand history of the Dominion. The Senate convened, debated, discussed in circles. But in the end, nothing happened. No sanctions. No justice. The message was clear: humanity did not matter. And for a moment, the galaxy waited for them to accept this truth. They waited for grief, for mourning, for submission. Instead, they were met with silence. Humanity did not scream in outrage. They did not beg for justice. They simply went quiet. As if something ancient, something buried deep within them, had finally awakened. The first diplomats sent to demand answers were ignored. The second were turned away. The third were never sent at all. Because by then, humanity had already made its decision. The silence did not last long. It was the kind of quiet that comes before a storm, the kind that makes empires uneasy. At first, there was nothing unusual. No official declarations, no threats, no grand speeches of vengeance. The United Earth government sent no more envoys, and the Senate assumed they had accepted their place. Then the movements began. Factories that once produced civilian ships shifted overnight. The drydocs of Mars and Europa ran without pause, workers toiling under artificial suns to meet impossible quotas. Human stations on the fringe of known space, once peaceful hubs of trade, turned into heavily fortified strongholds. And still, they said nothing. The Zorvath Dominion did not see the change for what it was. They saw the expansion of a species desperately clinging to survival, trying to protect what little it had left. They mistook preparation for fear. And then, without warning, the first blow fell. A Zorvath supply convoy, gone. Not destroyed in battle, not intercepted with demands, but erased. No distress calls, no wreckage. Just silence where entire fleets had once been. Days later, a military outpost at the edge of Dominion space reported a breach in its defenses. By the time reinforcements arrived, the base was nothing but ruins. No bodies. No survivors. The Dominion's high command was unconcerned. Piracy, they claimed. Insurgents, perhaps. Humanity could never strike at them directly, not with their numbers, not with their outdated technology. They did not understand. Humanity had never fought like the great empires. They did not stand in neat formations, did not meet their enemies in grand space battles dictated by tradition. They had learned war from a world that had tried to kill them at every turn. From jungles, from deserts, from frozen wastelands and endless oceans. They had fought for survival long before they reached the stars. And now, for the first time in galactic history, that survival instinct was focused on something greater. The attacks did not stop. They spread. Entire logistics networks collapsed overnight. Planets on the Dominion's borders went dark. The Zorvath war machine, so accustomed to conquest, now found itself fighting an enemy it could not see, could not predict. The first real counterattack was launched against a seemingly insignificant human colony, a response meant to send a message. It was a mistake. The fleet never returned. By the time the Dominion realized what was happening, it was too late. Because humanity was not fighting for conquest. They were not fighting for power, for territory, for resources. They were fighting to erase the enemy that had taken everything from them. The first empire to fall had always believed itself untouchable. The Zorvath Dominion had spent centuries expanding, crushing lesser civilizations, enforcing their rule with unchallenged brutality. Their fleets were vast, their armies endless. They had never known true fear. Now, fear was all they knew. The war they expected never came. There were no negotiations, no battles fought on their terms, no grand confrontations where they could display their strength. Humanity did not fight for glory. They fought to win. Supply chains collapsed faster than they could be rebuilt. Communication networks were shredded. Entire fleets were lured into empty space, only to vanish without a trace. The few distress signals that did make it through spoke of weapons no Zorvath had ever seen before, of tactics that defied reason. The Dominion's leaders could no longer dismiss the truth. Humanity had not just learned their strategies, they had surpassed them. The scattered remnants of their forces reported facing ships that moved faster, struck harder, and adapted with terrifying precision. Entire planets surrendered without a fight, their people knowing that resistance only delayed the inevitable. Desperation set in. The Senate, once indifferent, now watched with unease. They had believed humanity was too small, too new to threaten the old order. That belief had died along with the first Dominion world to be burned to ash. Some called for intervention. Others warned against it. They had ignored the prophecy once. They would not do so again. The Skari, who had once spoken of humanity's rise in riddles and half-truths, now issued a single warning. It cannot be stopped. Even those who had once mocked the idea of a human-led future now whispered what could not be denied. This was not a war of equals. It was an extinction. The Dominion's final attempt at resistance came in the form of a last stand over their capital world. Every warship they could muster, every soldier they had left, all gathered for a single desperate push. They believed humanity would finally meet them in battle, that they would finally have a chance to fight as they had always fought. The humans did not engage. Instead, their ships remained just out of reach, bombarding the planet's surface with relentless precision. Defense grids failed. The skies burned. The Dominion's armies, waiting for an enemy that would never come, realized too late that they had already lost. And when the bombardment ended, when the smoke cleared, there was nothing left of the world they had once ruled. The Zorvath Dominion ceased to exist. And the rest of the galaxy understood, humanity had not been seeking revenge. They had been delivering a message. The war ended, but the silence that followed was not peace. It was something far worse. Across the galaxy, the ruins of the Zorvath Dominion stood as a warning. A civilization that had once stretched across hundreds of worlds had been reduced to memory, its people scattered, its legacy erased. No empire had ever fallen so completely, so quickly. The Galactic Senate reconvened in a desperate attempt to restore order. The old alliances, once built on power and intimidation, now crumbled under the weight of fear. The empires that had ruled the stars for millennia now whispered among themselves, their arrogance shattered. They had thought humanity insignificant. Now, they scrambled to understand how they had miscalculated so badly. For the first time in history, the Senate sent a message not as rulers, but as survivors. A plea for an end to hostilities, for diplomacy, for anything that would prevent the same fate from reaching their borders. The response came swiftly. It was not a demand. Not an ultimatum. It was a reminder. We did not seek war. You left us no choice. No further words were spoken. No conditions were set. There was no need. The message was clear. Humanity had nothing left to prove. The Skari, the oldest race in the galaxy, were the first to declare their neutrality. They withdrew from the Senate, distancing themselves from the politics of species who had failed to listen. Others followed, afraid of drawing attention, afraid of what humanity might do if they made another mistake. The great empires, once united in their indifference, now found themselves divided by fear. Some sought to strengthen their defenses, others whispered of treaties and alliances, but all understood one thing. The balance of power had shifted. Not because humanity had taken control. Not because they had demanded submission. But because they had shown what happened to those who stood against them. And for the first time, the galaxy feared the future. Not because of a prophecy. Not because of old warnings. But because they finally understood what humanity had always been. Something unstoppable.